Catherine McLean, who's one of the early researchers at Hopkins who worked on this, she felt strongly that the value of the psilocybin journey should not be restricted to the patient, that the caregivers too would get a benefit from it, because they too are facing death at one remove, but it's very much on their mind. And the relief people got was, I heard lots of different stories, and the common thread, some people did have an image of an afterlife, and they had a sense that they were going to enter some great plane of consciousness, or that there was a plane of love that awaited them, and they were pulling back from that, but they saw what was coming, and that was enormously comforting. Others, though, had a kind of more naturalistic idea. I remember this one woman, also in her 60s, and also a New Yorker, told me about going underground, and she was passing through underground, and she hit this wall, and she realized it was the wall of a crematorium, and that she died, and that she then kind of was dissolved in the soil and taken up by the plants, and it was okay. Now, is that a vision of the afterlife? That's actually what happens very often, right? I mean, that's, we do dissolve and we are taken up by life, or whether we're cremated or whatever it is. But what was going on is her sense of who she was had dissolved, and that her sense of self-interest had expanded. It wasn't just this bag of bones that we are. It wasn't this narrow idea of myself. And this is what Bertrand Russell said when he was asked how to die well. He said, to the extent you can expand your sense of what are the boundaries of yourself, what is your self-interest, to take in first your family, your offspring, perhaps your community, perhaps the natural world, perhaps the universe. The wider you make that sense of self, the less consequential your own extinction becomes. And I think that's what's happening. I think that on the psychedelic experience, people are experiencing a consciousness that's less bound by their bodies, less bound by their narrow ego, and that you can see the world, at least temporarily, from a much broader perspective that feels to some people like a consciousness that extends beyond your head. I mean, that you're partaking in something that's in the world. And some people do come to the conclusion that consciousness exists outside the mind, and that we tune it in. And that's a very common psychedelic insight, but it's also a philosophical position of Henri Bergson and people like that. I have trouble crediting it. I mean, I tend to think consciousness is still produced by minds, but I can understand how you might think that, because there is this other consciousness that you're borrowing in the experience. And that, I think, that is an enormous comfort to the people who are dying. Okay. That consciousness, you have a feeling that it's permanent.